So what you're gonna do is instead of having your foot smack, your foot's gonna hit the ground and you're gonna control it down just a little bit. It's not gonna smack. It'll be pretty quick because you're running, but it's gonna be controlled. That is the issue, okay? If you take one thing away from this, pay attention here. All right, today we're gonna talk about an injury that if you're beginning running, if you're new to running, or if you're not running mileage that's, I'd say about 30, 40, 50 miles a week, somewhere in there. If you're kind of in the like 20 or lower, or if you're coming back after a long time off, shin splints probably have been in your life at some point. Now, if you're a more experienced runner, then I still want you to stay tuned here because we're not going to just talk about how to treat shin splints. So we could do that, right? I could put on my sports medicine hat and tell you exactly what to do. And we will dive into that a little bit, but I want to tell you how to get rid of them forever. Because there's two things about shin splints, okay? One of them is that it's an overtraining injury due to biomechanics. So if we run with biomechanics that favor not having a shin splint, then nobody ever needs to get a shin splint ever, beginning runner or not. It's a biomechanic thing, and I'll show you how to sort of tweak the biomechanics for that. And then the second thing is that shin splints aren't the end of the world because they're not dangerous really, unless they turn into a stress fracture. And we're going to talk about how to identify, is it a shin splint? Is it a stress fracture? And here we go. So the first thing that I'm going to share with you is that just because I want to put on my medical hat here for a second and say that shin splints aren't really shin splints. So what a shin splint really is, kind of in the medical terminology, is when the two bones, so I'm going to use my arm here as an analogy because the forearm is kind of like the leg, okay? So you've got two bones here, just like you have two bones in your leg. And when those bones kind of start to shift apart and split apart like that, well, that's called a shin splint. But that's not what we mean. When someone says they have shin splints, that's not what's happening. If you had that, it would be a high ankle sprain along with the shin splint, and it's not what's going on. So I do want to clarify the terminology here. The best way to talk about this is medial tibial stress syndrome. Now, medial means close to the inside, right? And it's close to the inside of your tibia, which is that bone in your leg. You got two bones in your lower leg, right? And if you touch right where the picture is here, right on the inside, that's your tibia. And on the inside of it, kind of where you feel bone and then you feel a blob of muscle, your calf muscles there, right there. That's where the pain is. So it's medial tibial stress syndrome. And I'll share with you why this happens biomechanically, like what causes it. And then we're going to zoom in kind of on the cellular level. I'll tell you what's going on. And then we'll talk about how to get through it. I'm going to make a little note for myself so I don't forget. Let's talk about the therapy for it as well. Because if you have these, don't fret. You can get rid of them pretty quickly. It's not fun, but you can get rid of them. Okay. What causes a shin splint? I'm going to put a couple pictures up here. First, I want you to have a visual of what is going on. So it's called medial tibial stress syndrome. So there's this muscle called the tibialis anterior, and it runs along the tibia or along that shin bone. And there's one in the back too called the tibialis posterior. So this is the one in the front. And what it does is it takes, if you look at this picture here, there's muscle and then it goes down the leg and turns into tendon. And that tendon hooks onto your foot. And what it does is it takes your toes, your foot really, and pulls it back like that. It pulls it back as opposed to pushes it forward like you're a ballerina or something. So you can see on this picture here, I want to leave this up for a minute so you can visualize. Imagine that patient right there is pulling their toes up towards their head. Now that muscle is contracting. So this is the muscle that's getting hurt, okay? And it's actually not the muscle, believe it or not. So here's the reason why shin splints are so common as opposed to any other muscular thing that could go on in the lower extremity. Here's the reason, okay? When this hand here is going to represent a bone, and then my fingers here, they're going to represent muscle fibers. Now, muscle fibers normally attach to a bone like this, okay? But the tibialis anterior is a feisty little devil. Now, he doesn't want to attach like this because you want to have that muscle be really strong. You need to be able to lift your toes. If you can't lift your toes, you'll basically fall over when you run. It's called drop foot, right? You'll just smack your toes in the ground and you'll trip. That's not really good for running away from a tiger, right? So this muscle needs to be strong. It needs to be able to go forever and be the last muscle to conk out. So instead of inserting like this, it inserts like on an angle like that, okay? Now, what's the advantage to that? You have more surface area contacting the bone, which means you can have more muscle fibers in a given area pulling on a bone, and that's a really good thing. And so because of that, you have the ability to really cause pain on the bone, and that's what the pain that you're feeling is. It's not pain in the muscle, it's pain on the bone. Now, there's a wrapping around the bone called a periosteum, right? But you can kind of think of it as like the shrink wrap over a bone. Now, when a muscle fiber attaches there and it pulls on it just a little bit, it pulls on the plastic wrap on the bone just a little bit, and that really hurts. It really hurts. It hurts almost as if you've broken that bone. It's a pain in the bone, the same as if you had broken it, really. So that's what's going on here. Now, why does it happen? Let's take a look. I'm going to pull a couple other pictures for you. Now, we're going to skip ahead and then come back just because of the order of my pictures here. But here's how you can tell if this is a shin splint or a stress fracture. So a shin splint is going to be a general area that kind of hurts. Now, you can press on it with your finger and it hurts. And if you move your finger up or down a little bit, it's going to hurt about the same. And move it a little bit more, it's going to hurt about the same. It's kind of within an area. Now, if this goes on for a really long time, then you can actually get a stress fracture. And the way you'll know it's a stress fracture is if you take one finger or a pencil, something really small, and you find one spot that, really hurts, and then you move that pencil just 1 inch, 1/2 an inch even, and you push, and there's less pain. There might still be pain, but it's significantly less. So that's called point tender. And if you're point tender, then you do want to rest. And you'll do a couple of the therapies that I'm going to tell you about at the end of this video here. But let's talk about how this is caused. And this is going to help you whether you're a beginning runner or not, because we're talking about the biomechanics now. And this is optimal biomechanics for anybody. So if you're an advanced level runner, check this. Now, kind of disregard that it says shoes versus barefoot. This is true. You will run more like this when you're barefoot, but that's best saved for another training. I want you to look at one thing on this picture here. Now look at the guy on the left in the red that says shoes. Now I'm going to circle his calf here, right where the tibialis anterior is. Now look at his heel. His heel's on the ground, and then his toes are kind of pointed up, right? So he's not going to run like that. You're not going to land on your heel and then stay on your heel all the way through. You're going to land on your heel, and then your toes are going to come down and hit the ground. That's where the problem is, okay? It's when the heel hits the ground and then the toes come down to the ground, because you're not going to just hit the ground and slap the ground, hit the ground and slap the ground. You're not going to do that, probably. Sometimes you hear a kid running around, or like an overweight adolescent kid who's like really weak running down a hill, and you hear smack, smack, slap, slap. Okay, that's because he has really weak tibialis anteriors, but you probably don't. So what you're going to do is, instead of having your foot smack, your foot's going to hit the ground, and you're going to control it down just a little bit. It's not going to smack. It'll be pretty quick because you're running, but it's going to be controlled. That is the issue, okay? If you take one thing away from this, pay attention here. When you control the fall of that foot, you are basically ripping that muscle, okay? It's called an eccentric contraction. And I'm not going to go too much into that on this training here. We have other trainings on eccentric contractions. That's what's happening. You're ripping the muscle. Now, look at the runner on the right, okay? Now, if you're not landing on your heel, if instead, now this is exaggerated. Nobody lands way up on their toes like that, but exaggeration is okay to make a point. When you land on your toes, or if you land just flat on your foot, which is arguably the best way to land, but don't even get me going on foot strike right now. Let's just pretend that you land flat on your foot. Now, is there any possibility at all that you can rip those muscle fibers? Think about that. Is there any possibility at all? Is it possible to even get a shin splint if you land on your midfoot? The answer is no, you can't get a shin splint because, again, your foot hits the ground, heel touches the ground, boom, right there. Now to control that fall, right, you rip a little bit of those fibers and it pulls on the bone and it creates that pain. Now if you land flat, it goes down, boom. So if you land flat-footed or even up on your toes, then there's no ripping that is possible. There's no pulling that's even possible because that muscle is meant to lift your toes up when your foot is swinging through, and it's not meant to be worked at all when your foot is landing. Make sense? Okay, now I'm going to tell you how you can get rid of these if you want. And there is a holistic way and then there's a short-term way. I'm going to give you the holistic way first because that's more applicable for you guys. And then I'm going to give you the short-term way. If you actually have shin splints right now, I'll tell you how to get rid of them. Okay. So the long-term way is you want to not land on your heels. And now this is a big conversation about how to get over heel landing. And there is a multifaceted approach to this. Okay. So we're talking about two things. Here's the first one. This is how you change the biomechanics. Now, you don't just willfully tell yourself to land on your midfoot. That won't really work. It'll work a little bit in the short term, but eventually you're going to forget, and it doesn't address the reason for why you're landing on your heel. Now, the reason you land on your heel, I just did another training on this, is that you need the extra time on the ground to apply force because the muscles are not powerful enough. Okay? Think of it this way. When you're sprinting, you don't land on your heel. At least if you're a good sprinter, okay? You're going to land up on your toes. And the reason is because you have powerful muscles. You've trained yourself. And you don't want to be on the ground very long. It takes energy. The longer you're on the ground, the more energy is wasted. It doesn't take any energy to fly through the air. It just takes energy to be on the ground and create that force to fly through the air. So the shorter amount of time you're on the ground, the better. And the reason you land on your heel is because the muscles aren't strong enough to bound off of the ground really quick. If they were, you would land right under your center of mass and just like a spring, just pow, right off, pow, right off. But when your muscles get tired, like at the end of a marathon, or if you're beginning running, this is why this is a beginning runner's thing, your muscles aren't powerful enough to rebound that quickly. And so you need to stride out in front of you a little bit in order to just be on the ground longer, to apply force for a longer time. Make sense? So the real long-term solution for shin splints is to strengthen the calf muscles and the quad muscles and the glute muscles. And you want to not just strengthen them, you want to increase their power. And you can do that through basically running more over time. This is, again, why this is a beginning runner's injury. But if you want to take the elite level approach, then you want to do a little bit of plyometrics. And the most applicable plyometric for you is jump roping. You can jump rope on 2 feet or eventually graduate to 1 foot, which is pretty tough. And these will be of the past. The muscles are going to be strong enough. Now, you could do that. You could also change your shoe. Now, look again at our runner here who is landing on his heel. If he has a shoe, imagine for a second that he's wearing high heels, okay? If he had high heels on, would he be more or less likely to land on his heel? Well, he'd be more likely to, right? Or women out there, when you wear high heels, if you had to run, wouldn't you be forced to just like get way up on your toes because it'd be so easy to just land on your heel and you'd smash your heel, right? So the bigger the wedge you have under your heel, the more likely you are to land on your heel and the more likely you are to have a shin splint. So what you want to do is over time, gradually bring the heel down and move towards what's called the zero drop shoe. You've probably heard of this. Traditional shoes have about 10 or so millimeters of ramp, it's called. And ramp you can think of as how big the high heel is. So 10 millimeters, anywhere from 0 to 13 is really kind of the range. Chances are that you're in a shoe that has about 10 millimeters of ramp. Now you could get into a shoe that has 0, or if that's, I recommend that you step down gradually. So either get a 0 drop shoe and rotate it in slowly, or get a shoe that has 4 or 6 millimeters for your next shoe and do that and then graduate to a 0 later. Now by doing this, you're going to be much more likely to land on your midfoot. You at least give yourself a fighting chance to do it. Now that's a whole long explanation for why that is. Trust me. And it's kind of intuitive as well. Just look at the picture. Look at the guy landing on his heel and imagine if he were barefoot, i.e. he didn't have a high heel on, would he be more or less likely to land in that position? Okay? Now, I promised you that I would tell you if you have shin splints, what to do. Now, the best thing to do is not take medical advice over the internet and go see your doctor. So this is not medical advice, but this is a medical practitioner giving you a basket of tools that you can use at your discretion. Okay? Consult your doctor. Now, what you can do is the following. First one is do ice massage. Now, ice massage is basically, it's not really massage, it's moving ice around. And the reason you don't just want to slap some ice on it is because you want to ice a big area, and you want to, because the bone is so close to the skin, you can actually get the ice right to the bone, which you're not able to do with other injuries, okay? So what you do is you take a Dixie cup or a plastic cup and you fill it with water and you freeze it. Then you take it out of the cup or peel the cup away. Now you have like a cylindrical piece of ice. And guess what? That cylindrical piece of ice is easily going to fit along the inside of your shin, right where the pain is. And you take it and you rub it up and down your shin, the shin bone, okay? You want to cover the whole area, and you're going to do this for about 12 minutes. It's going to melt. It's going to go everywhere, so put a towel. And you do it for 12 minutes. I could give you the reasons why. Just trust me. Don't do it more than 20, and 12 minutes is the minimal effective time. So 12 minutes when you're putting ice directly on something like that, where there's bone, okay? You do that, and it's going to decrease the inflammation. Then that's one thing that you're going to do. Second thing you're going to do is perhaps before you did, not after, okay? Either another time or immediately before you do the icing. So I should have said this in reverse order. What you're going to do is massage it with your thumb. Now you're going to take your thumb and you're going to kind of stick it where the pain is on your shin. You're going to push as hard as you can tolerate, and then you're going to drag your finger down the inside of the bone, and it's going to hurt. And I'll tell you, if you have a chronic problem here and you go to a physical therapist, they're going to do that. They're going to take a little plastic device or a metal device, and they're going to run it right down there, and it's going to hurt. Normally people like scream out in pain, so it's hard to do to yourself because you can only inflict so much pain on yourself. Okay, do as much as you can. You want to massage it. And don't make yourself scream out in pain. Don't do that. Just as hard as you can tolerate, okay? Press into it and then run your finger. Now what you're doing is the following. This is what's happening. You have these muscle fibers here. Now they're injured, they're hurt, they're inflamed. So what your body does is says, oh, there's an injury here. Let me fix it. Let me take some scar tissue and throw it down there. So your body throws some scar tissue down, and it kind of acts like putty, and it glues everything together. Okay, now you have glued together scar tissue down there. Ew, gross. And what you want to do is break that up. So you break it up by rubbing along it. And now that scar tissue, instead of being all Mod Podge, gets broken up, and now can either be cleared out in your blood and in your lymph, or can realign itself so that it becomes tendon. Does that make sense? I'm getting a little technical here, but trust me, massage, then ice, and change your biomechanics. Those are the things that you want to do. Now, if you're having really tough problems acutely, you can also provide some support by wearing a calf sleeve or a compression sock. It should be compressive, right? Because what that's going to do is minimize the jiggling of that muscle against the bone, and it's going to stop the irritation. It's not going to help it heal, but it is going to help it from getting worse, okay? So that is the lowdown on shin splints. I hope that you guys aren't dealing with shin splints, but I know some of you are, and this is the step approach to get through it. If you're wanting to continue your running, go ahead and keep running as long as it's, first of all, not getting worse, because if it's getting worse, it could be moving towards a stress fracture. Second is it must be getting better. And third of all is because this is a soft tissue inserting on a bone, it's actually going to respond really well to warm up. So I would encourage you to start your runs with a walk or start it with a very easy run. And the longer you can take to do that, the longer the warm up you have, the less of a problem a shin splint is going to be. Okay, so I hope that was useful for you guys. There's loads of other things you can do. You can stretch your tibialis anterior, and instead of telling you about that, just go to Google and type in tibialis anterior stretch, and it's really easy. You just you can take your foot and put it on the rug and kind of put your foot forward a little. You can do something like that. It's very simple. But I'm not going to tell you how to do that here because you have Google if you're on the computer right now. I hope you guys got something great out of this. Thank you so much for watching. I'll speak with you soon. If you're looking for any more help with your running, with your mindset, with injuries, with how to train, we're doing an awesome class. And I invite you to click the link in the description here below and come and join us on that class. We're going to go. Hey, if you like that video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe. And the best way to give back is to take the link for this video and send it to just one of your friends. It really helps us grow. We appreciate it. Thank you. We'll see you on the next video.